Happy Wednesday. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yes, that's what he makes me do all the time. Welcome to another episode of The Process. We are here with Justin Poulin from Beyond Clean. And of course, my illustrious co-host, Deannard AKA Sterile MD. How's everybody doing out there tonight? We are looking forward to seeing you in the comments. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about entrepreneurship with someone who clearly has so much knowledge. Starting out with Beyond Clean, and I know a host of other businesses, so we thought it would be great to have Justin with us today and ask him a few questions. How are you doing tonight, Justin?
I'm doing great. The music got me in the mood. Like,
right?
I'm pumped up. Let's get into this conversation.
Yes.
I'm going to steal that for the show. Like,
yeah. You could we could do some battering right now. So later on, you might see a Beyond Clean logo in the corner somewhere.
I'll tell you what. We all learned from each other, and I already learned a great thing tonight. We haven't gotten started.
There you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we do. So I'm gonna do a shameless plug of myself. If you guys have not had an opportunity to check out my Beyond Clean episode, it dropped this week, and we're talking about storage. So go check that out. Just I have to ask, like, how do you guys come up with your topics for your seasons?
That's a great question, and we'd have to ask Hank because he is seriously the maestro with coming up not only with topics but guests. And he is also behind the scenes with a few of the other podcasts, not just Beyond Clean. And he really has it down to a science, finding great guests for all the different shows. And I'll tell you, one thing I know about his trick is it has a lot to do with people having something to say, being willing to talk about it on social media. So we're always, kind of looking out there on LinkedIn primarily, like who has something unique, something fresh. And honestly, that's how Hank got Beyond Clean started. And everything that we do on the social media side was, exactly that, having something unique to say, not being afraid to say it and getting the conversation going. So those are the people we like to talk to.
That is so awesome. And yes, I have definitely noticed that about Hank. He is a conversation starter. He goes out there, he gets it started, and then he keeps people talking about things that we would otherwise be talking about in our break rooms. That's about it.
And he grinds my gears sometimes with, some of his comments. I'm like, dang, you can't say that. That's wrong. And then I'm like, everybody has a different opinion. So, okay, he might be right.
Well, and I'll say, like, even at Beyond Clean, like, we're not trying to be the truth police, right? We're trying to get people thinking. We want people to be talking about the things, like you said, that maybe they're having one-on-one conversations. But, one thing that happens, I think, in this world of social media a lot is people congregate in, like-minded circles. And I really feel like we have an opportunity to change that in social media by role modeling. Hey, we can all come together and have disagreements and not see things the same way. What we have to do is we have to create a world where we can all talk about that and present those opinions and stay respectful and keep that conversation going. I think that's, we have a duty to do that because social media, I think, started by creating these like-minded circles, and we've got to change that. We've got to change it.
Yeah, true.
So good of you to say, because it's so true. And you see, I mean, it almost reminds me of like High School Musical or something, where you've got everybody's in their own little group and their own little clique, and you can't get them to get together.
And that's one of the reasons Alessandra and I came on, created this show and kept it going as long as it has, because we felt our voices weren't being heard on certain platforms, and we're like, why aren't they talking about this thing? It's like it was it's like, this is actually going on. This is going on. Let's not skip over it. So and then we decided, like, to challenge each other to bring up certain topics that weren't being brought up in certain areas. So they may be controversial, but they have to be brought out to the light to let people know this is actually going on.
Yeah, and we're not good at being uncomfortable, like, just in general as a society. I think we've kind of, in many cases, we've been fairly privileged, right? You look at other countries, we have a lot here. Even those who do not, still, in comparison to other countries, have a lot. And so I don't know how tested we really are in being, truly uncomfortable and working through that. But I want to also say that it really speaks to your entrepreneurial nature too, that you felt like there was something that needed to be said. And that's at the essence of becoming an entrepreneur, is identifying a gap, a need, or a desire that you have to get that message out, and then doing something with that. And, kudos to both of you for, not sitting by and saying, oh, I wish I'd done that. Or, 20 years from now, oh, everybody wound up doing these kinds of shows and I had something to say and I didn't do it. You're an entrepreneur when you take action on those things that you feel like need to be done.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Because it's not easy, right? And we don't have to tell you that it's not easy. There's a lot of second guessing that goes into it sometimes. And when you're navigating things that you don't understand, and things that you feel, then things that you feel super competent with, it's hard sometimes to navigate it and keep that like passion going.
Yeah.
But I heard you say in the beginning of the show, multiple shows. So how many podcasts are you guys actually running?
There's a little bit of feedback.
Yeah,
I think we have, you asked me how many podcasts I've got going on. Yeah. So there's 4. There's Beyond Clean, which is sterile processing. First Case is operating room. Then we have Power Supply, which is supply chain. And then we have Transmission Control, which is the infection control podcast. And I also got started in podcasting doing a Celtics podcast, which I still do but I was one of the first members of the new media, blogging, podcasts and whatnot, to get credentialed access to the locker room. So Alessandra, I know you're up in Boston when they won the championship in 2008. I was actually behind the scenes when they popped the champagne and, all the confetti went off at the end when they beat the Lakers. So really good stuff.
Wow. Okay. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was just a dream come true. I mean, there's so many things. I'll just tell you, this is kind of like this moment where I finally moved into being an entrepreneur, because I was working as a registered nurse. I hadn't really, done sales. I hadn't moved into any kind of a role like that. And I had a really a good friend that helped secure the credentials, but he's the one that really got him at first. And then after about 4 months, he wound up moving to North Carolina. So he said, hey, I'm going to pass these credentials off to you. Little did we know he really couldn't do that. That's kind of the Boston Celtics organization's decision. But he told me it was going to be fine. I handled it. Don't worry about it. And I was at an all-day training. And he told me like a couple of days before, you just send him an email, send it to this guy, tell him that, you're going to cover the game and you're going to be there and whatnot. And so I sent the email just like he said, and I never got a reply. So, and I've already told a lot of people that I'm going to go and cover this game on my podcast, right? Because I really believe that this was going to happen. So finally I get about midday and I'm on my lunch break at the training, and I haven't heard back from the Celtics org yet that I've gotten approved. So I pop out and I grab my cell phone and, I call the contact there and I'm like, hey, it's Justin. I haven't heard back from you to confirm my credentials. I just want to make sure, before I drive 2.5 hours from Portland, Maine to Boston, that you're going to let me in when I get there. And so I go back into my training, and they must have called back while I was in the training. I had my phone muted, and we had a mid-afternoon break. And I went out to the break and I listened to this voicemail, and they were like, Justin, the credentials aren't in your name. You're obviously, we can't approve you. These aren't transferable. So I got the no, right. Yes. And I was like deflated. And I remember like all the blood rushed to my head, like just disappointment, kind of shame too. Like, oh, why would I think that I would be able to do this? And just all the self-doubt, the whole thing. And then I paused for a second. It was one of the most important moments of my life. Honestly, I don't even know that I'd be here, doing Beyond Clean or anything, or any of my entrepreneurial endeavors that, I've been doing ever since then. But I paused for a second and I said, you know what? I was in the meeting when we met with them, and maybe it matters that we shook hands. And so I called him back. And I just tried one more time. I didn't take no for an answer for probably the first time in my life. I was 28 years old, and I called back and I said, look, I don't know if it matters, but you and I met in the initial meeting when the credentials were secured. I was there. and I'd still like to come down, if it makes a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, I understand, but I know how much, meeting face to face, does matter. And they called me back and left me a message. And when I got out of my training, I had the message and they were like, yep, you're approved. Come on down. And it changed everything because, I never would have. I was interviewing Doc Rivers and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Rajon Rondo and players that you never heard of, like Leon Poe, who I absolutely loved. And they were just, it was just like a phenomenal experience for me. It gave me all the confidence in the world. It really changed, how I saw myself, what I was capable of. And, everything has really kind of been history since that moment, the first time I didn't take no for an answer.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
And it could have been just as simple for you to take that first no and say, well, it didn't work out. Let me try it a different way and left it at that.
You don't get anything in this life unless you just go out and get it. And, you don't always get it, but you got to leave everything on the table. I think a lot of people, don't really understand that no regrets mantra until it's way too late.
It's too late. Approved.
Yeah, I like that.
Approved.
Yeah. So I had to drop a bomb. That's some good advice. I've been listening to you guys since I think the inception of the show. I don't think it was the inception. Maybe the summer of 17, close to 18.
No, you're right. It's been 4 years. It'll be 5 years next. Well, basically Labor Day. We launched, coming right out of the holiday in September. So we're coming up on 5 years. We got some cool stuff for year number 5 coming up in the new year too.
Yeah, Hank is kind of a truth teller because I go back to things he said and things he wrote. I was like, oh, he said that like 6 months ago. Oh, he said that, oh, no, that's what he meant. So like he kind of tells you stuff, but he doesn't really emphasize it, but he says it. And then you go back and I'm like, oh, Hank actually said some blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, oh yeah, this guy is so right. So like he kind of told us on our last the show we had him on
during sterile processing week.
No, before that. It was in June. He told us about your YouTube channel coming out with some new stuff in 2022 or by the end of the year. Yeah, he told us about the social media aspects, what you guys look for. If you want to work with Beyond Clean, what to do. And I was listening to the audio because I had to edit it. I was listening to the audio and I was like, this guy is saying everything as is happening right now. And I'm like, oh, he told us that like 6 months ago.
So it's funny something you just said about listening to it again after the fact. It is totally different to be hosting a show and you're kind of thinking about the flow and all of that. And so, throughout the summer, whenever I mow the lawn, I listen to all of our episodes for quality control. But I also realize how much I miss on the first pass because I'm having the experience versus being the listener.
Right.
And that's really cool what you said, Deannard, because it's like he told you, but you don't really remember it until you listen to it again when you're doing your production.
Yes. And he's giving me advice now. I'm like, he gave me that same advice before. I'm like, I didn't listen the first time. It sounds familiar.
Had that hard head. Had to say it a couple
No. So yeah, but I want to ask you one question. I listen to you. I listen to you guys a lot. Even if I don't listen, I do try and keep up, especially in the beginning. You guys said y'all didn't meet each other after like a year, 12 months, or actually meet face to face. What was the story with that?
So if you go to the website beyondclean.net, you'll actually see our very first connection ever was over LinkedIn. And I had worked for a instrument repair company. And then, I went and, started a company with a really phenomenal mentor of mine, Sean Fitzgibbons. It's a vendor credentialing organization called Green Security. So he recruited me. And after about 20 months, I got involved with another instrument repair company. And right about that time, I'd seen some of my old coworkers. They were all kind of recruited, to work with. At the time, the company was Prezio, and it was about to go through a merger with Northfield. And so, good friend of mine, Lane Tomlinson, was hired on to be the VP of sales, and we were just kind of talking. And he's like, "Are you following this Hank Balch guy on social media? Like, he's really interesting. He's got a whole unique voice in sterile processing. You should check him out." And I was like, "No, I don't think I did." So then I started following Hank, and we had another meeting in Michigan, and he and I got together again, and we were I was like, "Hey, you told me to follow that Hank Balch guy. I've been kind of reading his stuff. You're right. Like, he's really got a unique voice." And I was like, people have always asked me, like, how come I'm not podcasting, in my professional life? And, a lot of the answers to that was I only have one employer. And if they don't like what I have to say, I have 0 employers. It's kind of my favorite, and so taking that leap is sometimes difficult. But my mentor and business partner now, Sean, really kind of encouraged me, to diversify my experiences and stuff. So I didn't really have that concern anymore. And when I saw Lane, I said, if I ever did a podcast in healthcare, like, that's the person I'd do it with. And he was like, "You should reach out to him." And sure enough, at that advice, I shot Hank a message on LinkedIn and said, "I don't know if you've ever thought about doing a podcast, but would love to talk to you about it." So you can see that whole exchange there. And then we just started doing it. We came up with some topics, some potential guests. I said, we need, 4 of them. You need to be consistent, and you all are doing a great job of that. You got to have kind of a cadence that everybody knows what to expect so that they stay with you. And then we did not meet for 9 months. I believe it was the ISHM annual conference and expo. It might have been
nice.
Yeah. So it was like 9 months later before we ever met in person, and we basically like started this whole project.
That is awesome, especially because, when you think about business partners, you always think that it's some, long-term friendship or long-term partnership that has evolved. And, the internet, of course, has really changed that for everybody. And then, of course, the pandemic now has accelerated that tenfold.
Big
So
time.
that's awesome. Oh, so for those of us that are watching that don't know you, that maybe don't know the show, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you go from RN into social media? How did this come about?
Yeah. Honestly, it's kind of woven into all of that. As I had, kind of this aspiration to, do media. And I worked in this job where I did medical necessity reviews. So I'd call the hospitals and get clinical data. And then, we would basically administer benefits for an insurance company and, do advice and different things like that. And I would call the hospital and they'd be like, "Have you ever done radio? Like, you've got a really great voice for radio." And then I was like, "No, I mean, nursing pays a lot more than radio." And so what I wound up doing was just kind of creating that online, podcast live show about the Celtics. And then I was working as a nurse. And then I moved into a sales role when I relocated from Maine to Pennsylvania. I did a lot of education. I had opportunities as an RN to educate that I might not have otherwise gotten on the sales team. And, that really, I did a lot of in-booth education at AORN and ISHM's annual conferences. And that was just a great experience. I learned a ton. I learned how to present. It actually enhanced my podcasting skills from speaking, in live situations. And then I just moved into that sales role after I moved from Maine to Pennsylvania. And from there, doing all that educating and everything else, and finding Hank. But I will tell you, there's a lot of pain points along the way. You don't make major career transitions without sacrificing. Like, everybody thinks, "Oh, I'm just going to go do something I love and it's easy." But you have to be willing to not make money to make gigantic strides. Like, you hear people say, you got to take a step back to take a step forward.
Yes.
I mean, when I moved from Maine to Pennsylvania, I wanted to be in sales. I'd only gotten one. I'd applied for sales jobs. I'd only gotten one. Because a lot of companies think, yeah, you're used to shift work. Sales is a whole different breed. And they were right. Don't get me wrong. They were absolutely right. But to kind of cut my teeth in sales so that I could get those interviews, in 2009, I moved to Pennsylvania and started a job working as a mortgage loan officer just to get some sales experience. By the way, that was the worst time to be in mortgages. The market had collapsed.
Ooh, yeah.
So I sold my house for a loss in Maine. We moved to Pennsylvania. My kids were super young. My wife was in school, and I made $12,000 that year total income, in mortgages. And there were days when I was driving into the office and I was like, can I do this another day? Can I do this another day? I mean, you have to dig deep sometimes. And when I finally gave up, and I'm not much of a quitter, I'll stick it out. And when I finally was just like, I can't do this, I have to put my energy in finding another job. I just started applying for medical sales jobs, and I got a couple of interviews. And I remember in one of the interviews, I said, listen, I just made $12,000 completely stinking it up in mortgages. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but the reason I've not gotten a shot in medical sales is because nobody thinks I have any sales experience. And I'm here to tell you that after a horrible time in mortgages, and not a great time to be in mortgages, after that experience for a year, the fact that I'm still here applying for sales jobs ought to tell you I've got what it takes to do sales, because I still want to do it. I've already done all the downs. I'm ready for some ups. So
there you go.
That's, and that was really, that was another big thing for me, just that fortitude and that
good on you
transition
for
is
being
important.
able to sell that dream to someone else. Because when you don't
Especially
have the
after
background,
failure.
it's hard. Right.
Yeah. And after failure, I mean, that's like, how do you take something like you would almost want to guard that. You wouldn't want to tell somebody I only made $12,000 last year in sales, because they're going to see like, yeah, then what makes you think you're good at sales? Right. That's like the logical.
So how are you going to make us money?
I would ask that. So you have to figure out a way, like what you want to show people is character. If you want to do something really great, you have to show them your character. And that story could have been a failure story, and instead it was a character story. And I think it told, the folks that I was interviewing with at the time, Spectrum Surgical, what I was made of. And, they invested in me and they gave me an opportunity, and, the rest is history from there. That's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
But I guess that's what they say. Things will either make you or break you, right? Either you find a way to make it build you up, or you let it tear you down.
That's right.
But it's still a choice.
Yeah, it's always difficult when you're taking that next leap, that next step to go into something else. Thank you to our viewers, Leslie, Miss Combs, Arlen Bush is on also watching. Thank you guys for the support. So I have a question. When you and Hank met, like, what did you guys talk about? Did y'all talk about, hey, we're gonna do a podcast or build a brand, or just fool around for a little bit?
That is a great question, because honestly, I don't think we really had any like big dreams when I just was like, do you want to try doing a podcast? And I think that Hank hates it when I say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way. It became a business on accident, not because we didn't formulate it into a business, but it just wasn't what we were expecting it to be when we started. Hank was going to be, he was doing consulting. He just kind of transitioned. And I had just moved back into this like repair world with a new company. And I had very much more of a regional presence versus a national one, but my new role at these companies was more national. So I just thought if we did a podcast, people might get to know me a little bit more beyond the Mid-Atlantic region where I'd been working. And I think Hank was kind of the same way. This will help my business. And this will be something that we enjoy doing that helps reinvigorate our passion. And, honestly, I'd kind of been out of the sterile processing world for about 20 months. So I also felt rusty. And I was like, if I can just start talking to people about this industry so I can stay connected and understand it, I will support the customers that eventually decide to do business with me or whatever. I will be able to support them better because I'll know beyond what I'm selling. I'll understand their world, their industry, their challenges, how it's shifting, the things they want to talk about. So that's why we did it. I think after a little while, Hank said, it's not really making a lot of sense for me to be building two brands where I have my consulting brand I'm trying to develop, and then I have this brand for the podcast I'm trying to develop. And we're not really doing anything around, we're not really trying to monetize the podcast. It's just something for fun. So let's combine them. And then that's when I think it intentionally sort of became a business. And really we began to expand services. We made some really great hires. We brought Bob Mars on, who's since retired. We brought Lindsay Brown on. One of our newer additions is Brett, who's been, Brett Norton, who's our VP of Ops, and he's been doing a really great job. And so many other people, Bobby, like the whole team, Lisa, McCown, like the list goes on. I could probably spend the next 10 minutes listing off the people that have helped us get here, but not to mention, all of our partners in the industry, and the experts, right, that are willing to share their insight and come on the show. Like, you're a perfect example of that is, you had something unique to say. And so I just think that everybody needs to be a lot more willing to share their information, be part of that community. And it's just phenomenal. I see I don't know who it is that's
from
talking about
Ken Baton.
Oh yeah. Hey, Ken. Thank you.
That's awesome. So that was definitely a question that I wanted to ask is, now that you guys are in a space where you're building teams, what has that been like? What was it like to expand and scale up?
Scary. Really scary, because one of the things that happens that I think a lot of people don't think about, is the business aspects of, especially something like, like a podcast or social media consulting. Like, I don't even think people all really ever understand exactly what it is we're doing as a team. Like they understand the educational piece, but from a business aspect, like it's not really easy for people to kind of understand. And a lot of times it's really new and they're like, so how do you guys make money? What do you guys do? Like, it's not always, we get that question all the time. But I can I guess the thing I would say is people don't really think about what it is to be able to generate revenue, especially once you start to have an obligation to people. Like Lindsay Brown took a huge leap of faith to join our team, at a time when we were just getting to that next level. And, at the same time that we had to have an obligation, to make sure that we could pay her salary. And we had to deliver on that. And then every time you add somebody, there's a financial commitment. And and the downside of not hitting those financial, obligations is somebody loses their job. And in this company, losing your job is like, I just know how our team feels about the work that they do.
Right.
And losing their job is would be like losing something incredibly special, and important to them. Like, it would be for me. And I would feel horrible if we weren't able to meet those obligations and still grow the team. So the answer is twofold. One, relief that somebody else can help pick up the load and run with the ball and keep doing it. And then a whole lot of anxiety. It's just shifting into a new responsibility. Like, these are people, we have to take care of each other,
right?
For this thing to work and for everybody to be happy that they made the decision to join the team. So that's maybe an unconventional answer, but that's the answer.
I think it's great. And I it makes me want to ask too, do you think that obligation is what's different about working in a corporate space versus going into business for yourself? Because it seems like, obviously you guys as owners will have this great sense of, like you said, obligation to make sure that everybody has their pay, but also your team members, I would think, would, have a little more sense of responsibility about kind of bringing something to the table, if you will.
Yeah. Small business versus corporation really requires a different mentality from the worker in that environment. I worked in, healthcare organizations, which has a little bit more of that, as a registered nurse, has a little bit more of a, corporate kind of feel, meaning, it seems like the money's coming in and you just get your salary and everything is kind of safe. And, it's just, and you're working regular hours and, there's things like performance improvement plans and all this to help you. And there's human resources. And like in a small business, that's just not the environment that you're in. There are no guarantees in a small business. There is no 40 hours, do your 8 and go home.
Right.
It bleeds into all areas of your life. And
Yes, true.
yeah. And so that not everybody is suited for that. Sometimes you can see like a rock star in the corporate world, and then you'll bring them into a small business and like, it just doesn't compute, and it's not because they're not good workers, and it's not because they're not smart. It's just, there's just like a missing piece about, how that works. And, on some level, everybody's responsible for generating revenue to support their own, role in the organization. And that's hard for some people to do. I think a lot of people who are really talented don't, when they move into a small business kind of role, they don't understand that they almost always have to be selling the company. They have to take on a sales type mentality to some degree, because you just don't have enough people on the team, to do it without everybody. You don't necessarily have to do it all, but everybody's got to kind of contribute a little bit to keep the flow going. And then that's how you have a thriving organization.
And that's very interesting, because I always, Alessandra always told me I push her too hard to work too late.
I told him he the worst boss ever. Late hours, no overtime, no break.
Is he calling you at 3 a.m.? I was just thinking,
because I'll be up at like 2 a.m. I'll be like, okay, did you send an email?
And I'm like,
I was joking, but I think that's hilarious that I nailed it.
So yeah, I do understand that. So sometimes you have no like track of time. Like, you want to get something done, and you want to get it done. So you like, bedtime is,
there's only so many hours in a business day. Yes. And like, one of the things that we said, like, we wake up and we clock into our dream. Like, there's no off hours when you work for yourself.
That's right.
And and you having this mentality, because I just recently joined the Great Resignation. And coming out of the corporate space, that was one of the big transitions for me. It's like, it was not a slowdown at all.
No, it's more work.
It's more work. And so even when you're not working, I find, especially because if you're passionate about it, it's always on your mind. So it's like, even when we're not working on the show, we're working on the show.
Yeah, it's critical that you have that level of passion. You literally have to be willing to do it for free. If you're not willing to do it for free, I'd say your odds go down substantially for success. It's just the way it is.
True. So we'll take a little break, but first, guys, go to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell for any new shows or programs we have coming out in the future. And after this break, we're going to come back. We're going to ask Justin if he and Hank ever fought about anything. So we'll be right back.
You sound
Poulin in the house, talking about entrepreneurship, and definitely give us a couple good nuggets. Now, he's let me know things I'm doing now is not totally strange, and I can relate. I can relate. So that's definitely a positive. So right now, I want to know the tea.
All right. Music.
So who's winning, right? When you say, I want to do this right now, and Hank says, I don't know, man. In his soft voice, I don't know. Maybe we should wait.
It's going the other way. You have it backwards. And I'm glad you gave me 30 seconds to think about when we argued. Usually I've had too much whiskey if that's happening. Now, I think honestly, it's more like I had to early on say, Hank, you can't do all this on your own. Like, these are all awesome ideas. And I mean, the guy is an idea machine. And so my thing was, in time, are you going to be able to get somebody else to be able to do this? How do we, operationalize it so that we can scale it, so that it's not just, we do it, but we only do this for this one, customer, this company, or we only do this educational thing this way. A lot of it has been around, okay, these are great ideas. Let's build it together. Let's get creative with it. But we have to have an eye towards, somebody else has to be able to take on these responsibilities from you at some point to lead the company. And I wouldn't say that we fought or whatever, but I'm usually the one that is like kind of reeling things in versus the other way. I think a lot of times, my role for a while was the sales role, and then we hired Lindsay. But I think a lot of times, people look at the salespeople as constantly over promising and under delivering, but it's not just the salespeople, it's the engineers who have, a crazy dream and they want to make it happen. It's, sometimes it's not just the salespeople, who set really high bars that are not always repeatable, over time. And so, if we ever fought, it was about me telling him, hold up, let's make sure. And then, but, yeah, I can't think of a time when Hank got mad at me. That's what I'm trying to put myself in kind of that reverse light.
That's okay. We'll have to bring him back and ask.
The thing with Hank, if he's mad at you, he'll word it in a way that makes you feel guilty. So.
Insane.
He's very he's very methodical in his thought process, and he's a very clear communicator about where, he sees how things don't fit. And so I don't think he really does get mad as much as, there's like almost kind of like a mentorship or a fatherly kind of like guidance, in the way that he sort of communicates things that are concerning him. I'm the one that's more likely, like if the finances get lean, or I'm looking, I'm the one that's kind of like freaking out, and he's, he's like kind of, very even keeled and even barred. But yeah, you'll have to ask him that question. I'd be interested. I'd be really interested to see if you can remember a time that we fought. It doesn't always happen. It's not always a perfect marriage. And especially when two people have very different skill sets, and Hank and I do have very different skill sets, but I also feel like we're almost continuously in alignment. And that's just a blessing. But that's just a blessing, because you don't really have control over that necessarily. And I think we do a good job of talking to each other through, learning something new constantly.
Right. That communication piece is so key. Because if you're not able to, talk about what you want to do, how you want to do it, it's not enough to just I have an idea. Right. Being able to actually put those things down together, I think that's awesome. I have to ask though, because we've made it seem like entrepreneurship is just so tough, and it is hard. And then we always hear this work-life balance thing. So how do you manage it? How do you manage your multiple roles and your family life and getting relaxation in? How does that work for Justin?
Yeah, not always all that great, to be honest with you. I will say, I try to do things like get involved. I coached my daughter's softball team in the rec league a few times. She recently she tried out for the first time for a travel team. And so I just try to chip in. The one thing I'll say is you only have so much time, and your kids don't always want you to be involved in their activities, but if they'll tolerate it, and I cross the line a little bit, right? Like my daughter wants it to be her thing sometimes, and I have to realize like this is me, needing to spend time with her. But it's also a good strategy that if you're going to go and sit on the sidelines, you're not really having quality time, with your family. So if they're doing activities and you can volunteer in those activities, so that when they're doing something, even if you're not directly with them the entire time, like you don't want to be crawling all over them, especially as mine become teenagers, right? They're coming out of that preteen and going into that teenage years, and they're my daughters.
Yeah.
And so I think I do cross the line a little bit sometimes. They're like, hey, maybe you could back off a little bit and give me some space. And it's like, okay, I'll do that. But for me, it's like, I just want to be there so that I have some presence. Because for the longest time, I was traveling. So there would be weeks, there'd be weeks where they wouldn't see me. And it does have an impact. You do make a sacrifice when you're going to be an entrepreneur. Your family does make that sacrifice with you, even if they don't get a choice in it. And so you just have to be as cognizant as possible. One thing we did, I bought a camper so that I could leave my computer at home on Fridays and we could go to the camper and just get full separation. Because when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't have like an office space or whatever, and even if you do, your home becomes your office.
Yes.
And so I think when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were just getting adjusted to that. But if you've been an entrepreneur, if you've done, outside sales, you're used to being, in your office, which is also your home. And so getting that separation, that work-life separation, is even harder when you live in your office. And that's what it is. You live in your office. And so that was one of the reasons that we got the campers. Like, we got to have a getaway. We have to have a separation. Like, I'm not mentally present. And during the downtime, on those weekends and stuff, when the family's not really doing anything and maybe the kids are tuned out to their phones or somebody's watching TV, what are you going to do at that point? Right? Like, I can either go mow the lawn, I can do, something around the house, or I'm going to open that laptop so that Monday morning isn't so hard for me again, because I know I'm behind. If you're an entrepreneur, you're behind on everything. You never stop feeling behind, and you're always just prioritizing and catching up and prioritizing and catching up. Yeah. And so that's the other thing that'll often happen is if there's downtime and nobody's really doing anything, those thoughts about, like, even when you're not at work, like you said, Alessandra, when you're not at work, you're at work. It's almost like, I want that to go away, right? It never goes away. It never goes away. But you're like, I want that to go away. So you go grab your computer and get some stuff done. And, you do have to be really conscientious of that. So those are some of the things you can do is, find a place away, schedule stuff. Entrepreneurs tend to have their schedules totally full. So you've got to block time out for your family. You have to put something in the schedule. It might feel like family is like sort of being treated like work when you do that. But if you don't do it, then they just get treated with work instead
there
of,
you go. I was just about to say, and don't feel guilty about it, that you have to put it on your schedule. You're choosing where to focus your attention and where to focus your time. And I think that's actually really powerful, rather than just, rolling into these different experiences or rolling past them because you didn't actually put it on your schedule.
And the other thing is, a vacation's never a vacation either. I mean, once your business is successful, you're not going to get away from the flow of the work, especially if you're kind of at the top of the organization. So it bleeds. I mean, I definitely do work on every vacation I've ever had since I moved into sales and out of nursing. And so you have to figure out ways to, like, again, schedule that at a time where it's not really influencing what you're trying to get out of your vacation, which is respite and a break from the work to some degree. So you have to be sort of like either willing to triage things. You have to be willing to tell people, hey, I'm on vacation, but I looped in so-and-so and we can connect when I get back. Or, you just gotta be willing to kind of buy yourself some time and handle the urgent stuff. I usually do it in the morning. So I'll get up, I'll have my coffee. Nobody's really going. My kids don't even wake up till noon on vacation anyway. And I'll just take care of whatever needs to get taken care of. But then you've got to put it away the rest of the day and let people know. I check it in the morning and I will keep the ball rolling. But, the rest of the time, I'm going to be doing my vacation thing.
That's good.
So I know you talk about spending time with your family, separating things, but things are probably a little bit better for you now than they were in the beginning. So you're probably a little bit, more able to manage that. But my question is, how did you manage things during the pandemic? How did that happen? How did you take more time off? Did you work harder? Or was that being an entrepreneur? Because I know that's being a worker. When the work's there, you work. When it's not there, you don't. So how did you keep yourself motivated? Did y'all work on new ideas? Did y'all just fall back on what y'all had built before?
Had to come up with new ideas. I mean, and I'll tell you, as soon as the pandemic started to happen, Hank and I pulled the team together and kind of said, like, look, we don't know what this is going to do. This is hurting our the hospitals financially. It's hurting the vendors that we work with and the supplier organizations financially. Like, everything could dry up. We actually encouraged everybody on the team to start looking around for part-time work just in case. I mean, we were very, very nervous about, how that was going to play out. But then I think, I almost feel guilty when I say this, because I knew you were going to ask this question. Every single business that I'm involved in has thrived as a result of the pandemic. And, I'll take the pandemic away and let those companies grow a little slower every single day of the week.
Right.
I have not enjoyed what we've all had to endure, over the last nearly 2 years. I guess we're about 4 months away and it'll be 2 years. But, I would make that go away. But what wound up happening was, Beyond Clean was a way to reach the audience that nobody could get in front of anymore. And living online became a way of life for all of us, whether that was getting your educational needs, whether it was selling services to help folks get through the pandemic, whatever it was, the only way to connect was online. And we already had kind of built this platform and, this community that we became part of that was already out there. I think that positioned us really well. And then even on my vendor credentialing business, all of a sudden, how people that are not employees accessed hospitals, got a light shown on it.
Definitely.
And so that took off because there was a great deal of interest in managing vendors and contractors and visitors. So it's been extremely busy. I think maybe the first month, I said, oh, I'm going to exercise. I'm going to, if I get this thing, I'm going to be in the best possible health so I can survive it. And I think that lasted like 3 weeks. And then, I definitely got sedentary. I think I got a little depressed because of all the uncertainty. And again, like we talked about, you have this responsibility, these people that work in your organization, and getting through that and digging in. It took me a little while to bounce back out of that. I think the other thing that happens to a lot of people and did at the pandemic, especially people who weren't used to working from home, is I was busy in some of my businesses, but I wasn't productive. And what I mean by that is there were a lot of people who didn't know what to do with themselves, that were struggling with that same question, right? Like, what do I do? And especially if they're in that more corporate environment, they're trying to prove to somebody that their job is valuable to them. I'm doing stuff.
Yep.
And what they were doing was it may not have been always valuable to the organization, but then people want something of you so that they can be busy, so that busyness justifies their job. And so I found myself like kind of sifting through a lot of requests and calls and discussions that really, I don't want to say they were purposeless. They served a purpose for that individual to feel productive, because they were also kind of needing to get a need met, as they were transitioning into a work from home gig. But there was just a lot of, kind of wasted effort, and you almost had to figure out, like, wait, is this really going to help somebody, or are they asking me to do something because they need something to do? And that was a thought for a good 6 months, in a lot of conversations that I had.
That's so important too, because a lot of times in business you'll hear that you need to have some discernment about, like, every customer isn't your customer. So how do you navigate figuring out, okay, I really need to invest some time with this person, or okay, this isn't really going anywhere.
Yeah. You're qualifying the opportunity. But there was still something that during that time, like, even if I knew it wasn't really a good use of time, there's still a component of that where you're relationship building by kind of supporting them through, a difficult time in a way, because they needed to feel productive. We all need to feel productive. So I just want to say that even when I was qualifying that, when I left nursing and went into I had a work from home nursing job. So I had like a stepping stone. So my first work from home nursing job was super autonomous, and there were really no metrics for my performance. And, I remember being very uncomfortable a lot of days with, what am I actually doing? What value am I providing? And I wasn't in an office, so nobody was really watching me. So there'd be days where like I'd get up and then I wouldn't really do anything productive until like 10 o'clock in the morning. But I was like, how do I be productive? How do I make use of this time?
Right.
I really didn't have anything to do. It just wasn't in the role. And then I would take my daughter to this daycare I hated having her at. And I would take her as late as possible at 10. And then by like 2:30 or 3 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. And I'd go get her and bring her back. And then I would feel guilty, and I would like try to do some work at like 7 o'clock at night. But I just think there's a lot of people during the pandemic that were really struggling with that same thing, is how do I maintain my commitment to my company and be productive and do these things? And it's just very, very different when you're at home. And then I started thinking about, wait, how much wasted time did I do in the office? Like I would go get a cup of coffee. Like how long was I standing in the break room having coffee, chatting with somebody? Yeah, for real. And then I started to think about that when people were reaching out to me, not knowing how to be productive. And I thought, maybe this is just that water cooler chat. Maybe this is coffee in the break room for this person. Because they don't have quite enough to do, but they also aren't getting socialized. So I think there was a lot of relationships with customers that got strengthened, and maybe the way I had to perceive that value and qualify that time spent had to be shifted a little bit too.
Definitely. And I can say from being on the management side inside of the hospitals at the time, it really was a unique opportunity for like third party vendors, because it was up to them how they responded. And, some of them were just like, okay, pandemic, and you didn't hear from them. And then we had other vendors that they went out of their way to try to find ways to connect, even if they couldn't get into the building. Well, maybe we can get on a car, maybe we can get on this, Microsoft Teams, or we had people recording videos to train the staff. So it really was a unique opportunity to see not only people's innovation, but their character around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, it's funny you talk about the character around that, but I mean, I could tell you, like, I had several phases. My character might have been really good through one stretch, but we're all subject to it. And then my character during other stretches was, not something to emulate. I mean, I just have to be honest with myself. There were periods of time, especially early in the pandemic, where I think I did a great job of being a leader and being strong, not only in the work environment, but in the home life, and then there were other times where I was extremely weak. And, you just have to be able to take a look at that, and you gotta face it, and you gotta work through it, and you gotta own it. That's all I know.
And I appreciate that authenticity, especially because I know like viewers watching, they're like, the man behind the man. But this is so honest of you to say, like, there were periods of time where it wasn't fun. It didn't feel good. We're hearing a lot of conversation from folks about like burnout, checkout, depression, anxiety that they're dealing with, just feeling overwhelmed by this experience. So I appreciate you just saying that, like, this happens and you have to work through it.
Yeah, let's be honest. We're not always proud of ourselves. But I think that sometimes we expect perfection. So when we're not proud of ourselves, we just kick ourselves while we're down. And, it's really more important how you bounce back and how willing you are to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, maybe I'm not proud of myself right now. And maybe I still need to do this for a couple of more weeks anyway. I mean, sometimes you just got to go through it to get,
through it.
And, you got to be willing to ask the people that matter in your life for forgiveness for not, being, and you're not asking for that forgiveness always because they are mad at you, or, it's not like reconciliatory with that person. Right. I'm not sure if that's even a word. I make them up all the time, but it's actually about, if they forgive you, then you let it go, and that's how you move on. Right. Yeah. And so, you just kind of have to be willing to do some of those things along the way. And I think, a lot of times that's what leadership is. I think people think leadership is being perfect and being that strong and never waver. And that there are times where that is leadership. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
But there are also times where, leadership is also humility. Leadership is acknowledging that you could have done better and refocusing everybody on let's just keep moving forward with this.
True. And the communication piece of it is very important. You got to communicate the ups and downs. So I have a sidewinder question to ask you. So what would Hank tell you in your downtimes to encourage you to keep going?
I think trying to think of like a specific one. I know what he would say. He'd say, we're doing great. What we have here is really special. It's something to be proud of. Keep digging in.
That sounds
It
exactly
would
like
just
him.
it would just be words of encouragement, to be honest with you. And I'm trying to think of a time where I was like, Hank, I'm freaking out. And I don't know that we've really had any of those kinds of moments, but I think, for the most part, like I said, he's got a very strong way about himself in terms of like being able to really see it for what it is and really, really just kind of, I don't know, give you that confidence. It's almost pastoral, in a lot, the way that he advises you and it's like, I'm at a loss for words, but it's one of the most important relations. I have several, but I'm fortunate enough to say that all my business partners, in companies, have been just great friends. They're really just great friends. And, Hank's been nothing but an amazing, friend and partner. And, I got to say that about Sean Fitzgibbons at Green Security as well. Like all he's ever done is support me and give me the flexibility to grow. And there's a lot of things that I would not have today in my life if it weren't, for those two gentlemen. So
Awesome. Justin, you gave us so much good information today about mentorship, about team building. As we get ready to wrap up the show, I have to ask for those that are watching that are thinking about going into business for themselves, that are potentially thinking about joining the Great Resignation, what tips would you have for them as they get started?
Yeah, I mean, just be ready to work really hard. We talked a little bit about qualifying, how we spend our time. You need to qualify, starting that business by really head checking yourself on something I said earlier. How long are you willing to do this for free? Because it could be a long time. And as a matter of fact, my Celtics endeavor was something I thought I was going to make into my career, right? And it never made money. So I'd also say you've got to almost be open to the fact that you're building a skill set. Even if you can't make it a living, whatever you're doing, it will come back, that skill set, in a different use. You just have to be ready for it. So like, I remember I did that Celtics podcast and I thought this is going to be my career. I was climbing, we started getting featured on the TV station that was broadcasting the Celtics games. I thought it was really going to happen for me. And, finally I was like, it's just not going to happen. I was even in a movie when they won the championship, like a little, like documentary movie. They followed me around and, I thought I was like, I'm on the rise. It's going to happen. And then it didn't happen. And I moved to Pennsylvania and I kind of went down this path. Ironically, the person that I then told the Celtics, like, give this guy, Nick Gelso, the credentials. He's now making a living covering the Celtics, like literally. So he's got, he's still a good friend. And if I need to go cover the team, he'll get me credentials and I'll go in, but I remember like afterwards, I was like, oh man, I really missed the opportunity. I wasn't patient. I didn't wait for it, or whatever. But the truth is I didn't have the business skill set. That's why it didn't happen. He did. And, I kind of handed something that I had off to him and then he made it a business. when I moved into sales and I made that move to Pennsylvania, I started to build the other skill sets that I needed to complement the podcasting. And here we are in this like crazy wild, meshing of my clinical background, my sales and business background, and then my podcasting background, all culminating in just a perfect fit. And so that's what I would say to anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur. Like, you can't lock in on, I want this business. You got to lock in on, I want to be an entrepreneur, and this excites me, and I'm passionate about this, and this is going to be a playground for me. And no matter what, even if I don't make any money at doing it, it's going to give me a skill set that I don't have today that I can't learn at a school. You're not going to learn this going into getting an MBA. You're going to learn about business, and you're going to learn business, but there's so many things that just can only be learned through experience and test. So you got to be passionate enough to do it for free, and know that you might have 10 different endeavors that you do for free before you finally get all of those skills that you need, and one finally hits that you really, love, and make it happen. So that would be my advice.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. That's excellent advice. And then I'm taking that advice to heart too, because I'm looking at like 20 different ideas right now, and I don't know which one to actually focus on. So I'm focused on all 20.
Focus on the 2 or 3 that you love the most. Chase your passion, because that's why you're sending emails at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. The last thing you want to do, though, is pick one of those that you don't really love, and then it starts to get on a roll, and you actually start to resent it, because then you won't get any value out of it. So you got to follow your heart on this one, because that's the only way you're going to stay with it and really be open to learning the tough lessons that you have to learn as an entrepreneur, and take them and in stride and keep going. So that's my advice there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Not an easy road, but it's worth it.
Right. I'm smiling.
Right? There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for coming
Thanks
on.
for having me.
Appreciate your time. You shared a lot of interesting, important nuggets, things I didn't even know. Hopefully someday, this is my wish, that the 2 of you guys could come on, and we could have a back and forth. And then
then you can start asking those questions.
Look, then I really
Hank
have
could be
to
like,
keep my teeth
I
up.
watched Justin's episode. He's full of it. I yell at that man every day.
We want the tea, Hank. We want the tea.
But thank you so much for coming on. And then, guys, thank you for watching the show. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday on the process. So thank you guys so much. Peace.